I will call this meeting to order.
Wonderful. And then Anne, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. We have Veronica.
Here.
Bruce.
Here.
Alexandra.
Here.
Patrice, which she's not here. And I do not see Sophia in the attendees to transfer her over. So I will keep looking for her.
Okay, if you'll just keep an eye out. All right, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Are there any adjustments, or can we move forward?
Yeah, I'd actually like to suggest that we add to the agenda selecting who will represent PPPSA on the community panel to interview Interim Chief Tabranza. That was brought up by Town Council last Wednesday, and I think ahead of the agenda getting created. So I'd love to.
It was ahead and we already published the agenda.
Yeah.
So just to know, I'm happy to do what all of you want, but we did get a little bit of pushback from the public because of the content changes to the agenda. So I think we just need to be mindful of that if we're going to add content, it should go out before it gets published. If we're adjusting or removing content, that's a little bit different, but we're also a subcommittee. So I think that it can be a bit loose, if that's the proper word.
We got on the agenda that we were drafting today for RESJ, which would be a week from now, to select both of those people, the PPPSA representative and the RESJ representative. So if that's okay. Yeah, because that agenda is still, it has to be, as an action item, it has to be on the agenda 5 days, I think, in advance of the meeting. Maybe I'm wrong on that number of days, but so is that, if that's okay, that would be the.
That's great. Last question I'll ask before I make a motion to approve the agenda is there a particular amount of time that I should have, or we should all know of, to submit items that we'd like to suggest be on the agenda in order to have that happen? Is that like a week before the meeting?
So it's generally the RESJ has to go out a week. It's almost a full week before. Generally, I submit to Anne and Garrett on Friday. They post, actually, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, 3 days. They post on Monday. So we do a final review on the prior Thursday. So it would have to, just backwards mapping from there, it would need to come in Thursday morning for the chairs and I to consider an addition to the agenda. Because if I accept it after the chairs have confirmed the agenda, then I'm not in an appropriate role as a facilitator to make changes on your agenda, essentially. So probably Thursday morning is your safest. Wednesday night is the safest, but Thursday morning would be a backup.
Perfect. That's so helpful to know.
Yeah, and it's the same for both PPPSA meetings. It's always the same because it's governed by Brown Act, and it's the same for RESJ.
Great. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second that motion.
Anne, can we have roll call? Which seems a little silly, but we'll make it official.
Veronica.
Yep.
Alexandra.
Yes.
And Bruce.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Quick addition. I think that getting items in will allow us to go a lot faster in the beginning. Certainly last minute things come up, which is understandable to adjust the agenda, but when it's big content buckets, it's happened a couple times, we end up spending about 20 minutes, which is, of course, everyone wants to have an opportunity to dialogue, but it makes it hard to keep us all on time. All right, I will open officially here with the land acknowledgement. So Fairfax Town Council and the Police Practices and Public Safety Alternative Subcommittee acknowledges that we are located on unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok people in present-day Marin County. We honor with gratitude the land itself and all of its ancestors, past, present, and future. I'd like to, with that, I'd like to ground us in our purpose. And I'm going to be a lot more vocal and obvious about guiding us to make sure that our discussions, our dialogue, and our agenda items are working towards this purpose. So our purpose here is to explore police practices, public safety alternatives, and funding and other related issues. Can I get a timekeeper, please?
Happy to be the timekeeper again, unless anybody else would like to take that role.
And Anne, could I get you, unless somebody else wants to take this, can I get you to be note keeper? Am I stealing that from anybody? All right. I was trying to be efficient there. And process observer. And I'd actually like to request that somebody who isn't white do our process observation, given some of the challenges we've had in our meetings to ensure a space that is one of social justice and liberation.
So that's me.
It is. Do you mind, Alexandra?
Not at all.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. You know, with such a small group, all these formalities seem silly, but we're going to roll with them anyway. So item B is our agenda planning for the next upcoming meeting with Interim Police Chief Tavaranza. And there's two items here. One is just to discuss generally the next meeting and what you'd like to see happen in the meeting. I would encourage us to really stay focused on goal-oriented meeting and one that relates to action items, given feedback about a lot of dialogue and not a lot of action. And that was from more than one member. And then the goal here with item B is to finalize an agenda before we end our meeting. So I'll just open it up. We're a tiny group, so feel free to just raise a hand and we'll have open dialogue. Alexandra.
Yeah, just for I don't have a word, but I emailed Interim Chief Tavaranza about coming to our meetings, and he had confirmed April 22nd. So just so that everybody knows, April 22nd will be the meeting where he will come. So yeah, just so that everyone knows that was confirmed. And then I guess moving forward towards coming up with an agenda, I really enjoyed the listening session we had. I'm curious what other people think about doing that again or having some time for discussion. Maybe it's like half and half, or what you all thought about that.
Veronica.
Thanks, Alexandra, for setting that meeting up and getting that going. I feel excited about hearing his responses to these second questions that we had distilled from our last meeting, right? The meeting 2 internal operations goals questions, and would love to, there was the question that Alexandra, you brought back from Interim Chief Tavaranza around that first question. And I know that that was a really important question for Patrice to have on there, and she's not here, so I don't want to change it yet. And maybe she'll join us this evening. That will be wonderful, so that we can address that. But just want to raise that back up, that he was asking for more clarification, that there was a vagueness to that question that he would appreciate some direction on. But other than that, I feel really good about the questions that we distilled, and would love to, now that we had that, I remember going into that meeting, our first one of the intentions of having it be the format that it was, where we really listened to him, was to have that start the foundation of building trust with him. And now I feel like there's certainly an opportunity to continue that, but to have a little bit more space for dialogue, whether it be between us and him, or to have the chance to have him answer those questions as we start the meeting, and then have a little more time for community questions that maybe haven't gotten on here that he could sit with. I guess I'm remembering last time there was a concern that we didn't want to put him on the spot. So I'm remembering that, but yeah, just want to open it up a little bit more for dialogue, for us to engage with him in conversation versus a report, but actually have a conversation would be my hope for the latter part of the meeting. What do you think about that?
As you're thinking through your agenda items, I'm curious, what do you feel like your collective goal is? And that might help you make some decisions about the agenda. What are you trying to achieve through the second meeting? Alexandra.
So I guess I would hope that we kind of established a relationship with Interim Chief Tabaranza in our last meeting. And as Veronica said, we can start to move forward and start to get into more of those conversations, and perhaps difficult conversations to have. But I think moving forward, I would like to start having dialogue with him, especially as we move forward with the appointment of the chief. And so I guess that's what I would like, to continue that dialogue and have as much information as we can to be able to allow for transparency, because I think that's what we heard at town council from public comment, is that they want transparency, they want to hear. And so I think in a way that's where the PPPSA can fit into that. Even though we aren't participating in the survey or in other ways, we will have one representative on the committee or the panel. But I think this is just another really great way for the community to be able to hear Interim Chief Tabaranza as we move forward.
So one thing you might want to think about is just as you're having a dialogue and getting more information from him, is thinking about towards what end, in terms of thinking about strategically how you're going to use the agenda time to accomplish the purpose of PPPSA. Veronica.
Well, I just want to ask Bruce if you have anything that you'd like to say, because I know Alexandra and I both have spoken already around this.
Asking me? Well, yeah, I was about to say something, but thank you very much. I would say, going back to purpose, our purpose would be to understand where we are now with policing in Fairfax, which I think we're beginning to do, and to see collectively, working with the police department and with the citizens, to see whether there are any ways that we can make improvements. And they may be subtle improvements, they may be improvements that are more in the community than the police themselves. They may be all over, but just to learn deeply what's going on and how we can possibly make it better, including just making it feel safer for people. So, so following Lisa's lead of starting with the goal, right? And then, so being able to understand, I think the questions, and I unfortunately don't have them in front of me right now. I wish I'd prepared.
We have them ready.
In front of me, but yeah, but the
Bruce, sorry to interrupt you, but do you want to see the questions? We have them ready.
Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah, but as I recall, I was happy with the questions, and I felt like we were getting as people have said, deeper into what are, is there any issue with the statistics that keep getting brought up? Let's look at them. Let's really try to understand what is being brought up and what the explanation is for what the numbers are and what they mean. And so, yeah, that's what I foresee as being where we start to get into. And it may not be only in one meeting. I think it probably won't, but I've worked with statistics a fair amount in the past myself, and it can take a while to really dig in and understand them. There can be a lot to try to understand what the numbers mean. But and also, I'll just say something about statistics, which is these are small numbers, they're small sample sizes, and so there's they don't, like, I've worked with birth statistics, and in birth there are some events that are extremely rare, and like they may naturally occur 1 in every 10,000 births. So if you only have 100 births to look at, then whether this event occurred once or 0 times, that hardly tells you anything at all, because you're talking about something that's 1 in 10,000. And so, we need to be careful in what we're looking at. But yeah, I think, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but that's, and thank you for putting the numbers up. I'll stop here.
And you can take us off screen share. Veronica.
Yeah, Bruce, thank you. I feel like part of my goal or my intention, particularly, well, from the broader view, I really hold to the goal of our mandate from the town council of reviewing police practices and public safety alternatives. Mm-hmm. And so my interest in this meeting with Interim Chief Tabaranza is to really there's been a lot of conversation about statistics and like kind of vague references to things. And I know in our last meeting that there was an expression of feeling like a lot of his work in the police department's biggest challenge was building trust with the community, and that there's been misinformation that he feels like is out there. And I am really curious to and it's been discussed in the town council meetings as well, and would just love to stop beating around it and be like, what are the statistics that people are referencing, and what are we needing to explain in order to, or do differently in order for people to really absorb. Statistics are meant to provide us with information. And so I'm eager to actually have the information that those statistics are meaning to reveal. Hi, Patrice.
Hi.
Hey, Patrice. Welcome, welcome.
And so that's definitely a big part of my interesting goal, is to take off the screen and understand what specific statistics are in question, and discuss that, so that both the town and community members can have a clarity around that and all be on the same ground with what we're speaking about. And I want to talk about public safety alternatives sooner than later, as a mandate that we have, and what that looks like. And for me, I'll say just briefly that there's a lot of information. I've referenced this book, and I know that Daria, I'm sad to not have her here, just want to state that, had referenced it too, but there's an incredible chapter in here in my grandmother's hands around police innovations that have taken place throughout many towns, in small towns throughout the United States. And they have to do with really making sure that our police force is taken really good care of too, that the mental health of our police force. And I want to know more about that. And so those are some of the questions that I have in terms of recognizing that for our public safety representatives to really be doing the best that they can and not reacting, that they're taking really good care of their mental health and psychological health is, and not that anybody in the police department is far away from that, but I think we all acknowledge that they face a lot of really intense things on a regular basis. And so I'd love to engage with him around what that looks like. Yeah.
I see your hand, Patrice, just a second. So Patrice, just so you know, we're on item B, and our goal for this section is to finalize the agenda for the upcoming meeting. And Chief Tabaranza said he could make the April 22nd meeting. So just to fill you in on where we're at in our agenda. And then Alexandra had her hand up first, and then you're next, Patrice.
Yeah, so I just really quickly wanted to give an update on the statistics in regards to the email I had sent 2 weeks ago. Interim Chief Tabaranza had asked for some clarification, and so that's why I reached out. Essentially what I had sent him, and would be more than happy to update him after, now that we're all speaking within the Brown Act and everything. Essentially what I had responded to him was that we have received some statistics, and also noted that he had expressed that there was some misinformation going around. I don't know what that necessarily specifically is referring to, but what I did say is that honestly, we have gotten some statistics. We would love to hear both sides, because we feel that that is important, and that this committee feels strongly that we hear Interim Chief Tabaranza as well as the other information, and we take all of that into account. That informs the work that we're doing. And then I listed not the numbers, but the what we got. So like the arrests made in 2020 based on demographics, the reports that were made to the DA, that kind of stuff, so that he can know that that's what we've received, and that we would love to hear what he has. So again, more than happy to email him again after we have this conversation, but just wanted you to know that that's what I had expressed to him.
I want to highlight something that I'm noticing in the comments that you're making, which is really an intention around having dialogue and not just debate. Kind of as a pattern of other meetings, it's been more of a debate vibe. And I think really what I hear you asking for is dialogue, which is going to lead to greater understanding. I think that if you can partner to have common goals, even if you see them different, and you can really stay in that stance of dialogue, that's going to help you continue what you felt like was so good from the last meeting, which was trust was built, some community was built. So just some food for thought in terms of getting a real target for your agenda. Patrice.
I actually completely forget what I was going to say the first time. I'm sorry. It's my partner's birthday. I was running around getting dinner. But I will say that we should not have Chief Tabaranza reacting to a member of the community. We should have him leading the data. And I feel like we are putting him between a rock and a hard place, because we're asking him to respond to data that we don't know if it's true. And the math that I've done on the little bit of data that we've been provided by Joe McGarry, it's statistically impossible. So I just want to put that out there, that we are putting our new police chief between a rock and a hard place for no reason.
Veronica.
Yeah, Patrice, Councilmember Kohler actually gave some statistics in the town council meeting, as you may remember. And from her statistics alone, there's information that's alarming from the statistics that she referred to.
She's a friend of mine.
Patrice, just a second.
I'm sorry, but guys, you know what?
Patrice,
I want to resign. I want to resign now. I'm done. I can't deal with this group. I can't deal with this group not acknowledging facts from fiction. Barbara Kohler is one of my best friends.
Patrice, I need to ask that you
know what?
I need to ask that you please hold the norm.
You don't need to ask me to hold the norm. I'm resigning.
Okay, I'm gonna have Veronica continue. I want to acknowledge what you said, Patrice, and that you have something very important to share with us. And I also want to acknowledge the norm of respect and active listening. And Veronica was in the middle of saying something. And so I'd like to ask that we have Veronica finish her comment. And Patrice has chosen not to be here with us. And so I will make sure to follow up with her after the meeting. Veronica, can you continue your thought, please?
Yeah, just needing to take a
Yes,
couple.
absolutely. And just for our team here to know, I will absolutely check in with her after. I just don't want to distract us from your goal tonight, which is finishing an agenda plan. So just know that I hold what she said in serious regard with great respect for how challenging this is for her. But I also know that I have a greater purpose to the group and to the community of Fairfax to make sure that we're fulfilling the purpose of your team. So not unnoticed by me, but I'll follow up outside of this meeting.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the way that you're holding the container of respecting the norms that we've all agreed to. Councilmember Kohler actually gave some statistics that also, separate of any other statistics that we have heard, though they're not in disagreement with statistics that Rethink Police has offered us. Rethink Police's statistics are coming from a public records request. It's actually information that's fully available. And all of the numbers check out if you look at the public records request that the district attorney gave us. So if there's any issue, it's actually with the numbers that the district attorney's office provided from that public records request. And there's information directly quoted from Councilmember Kohler around that. And I don't want to take any more time in our moment because I know that our agenda item is to decide what we're going to talk about. But I would like to have that cleared up with Interim Chief Tabaranza because I know that there's been a lot of pushback saying that there's been false information put out there, and I don't see that. And I'm so curious for folks to be able to articulate that specifically, and perhaps that's what we can engage in conversation with Interim Chief Tabaranza. And it's not to say that the police department is doing anything. I feel like we have to have common information if we're going to move into this place that I believe we're capable of even better than we already are doing. So that feels really important for me, that we all are coming from the same with the same information from the same base. I'm going to stop speaking at that point.
So Alexandra, is that something you can follow up on when you touch base with him again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anne, can you make note of that, please, for a next step? Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
All right, what would the next step be exactly?
That Alexandra is going to follow up with Interim Police Chief Tabaranza to clarify the first item on the bulleted list of questions and to bring up the issue of multiple data sets, to just bring that to the fore and ask him for a way to address that. Did I summarize that correctly?
Okay.
Thank you.
I was just really quickly going to say that I totally agree with Veronica in that I think it's important to hear from the community and acknowledge that our community members are also doing the work and they're also putting in time and effort. And also that the police, we don't want to assume that they are hiding anything. That's not the idea here. It's just simply so that we can create a dialogue and understand where the data is coming from, what the numbers are, and so that we can really get a holistic approach here and be able to understand and kind of make, it's not necessarily like that someone is wrong, just wanting to acknowledge that we heard from the police chief that there is misinformation. So acknowledging that and wanting to hear that and accept that for his truth. And so I think it's important for us to hear both.
Bruce, you haven't said anything in a while. Would you like to weigh in?
Well, I'm listening. I would, there's a possibility of different data sets as Lisa summarized it. That would be in the statistical world, that would be saying the raw data, that what is the raw data? Where does that come from? And I think probably an issue in this case could be just the interpretation of the data. How do you, what number do you divide by what number? What's the numerator, what's the denominator, and what do those mean? So that I think needs to be looked at as we try to interpret the data and see what it actually tells us. That can be a matter of really, are we looking at the right numbers? Like if we compare arrest statistics or whatever interactions that the police have had with the Fairfax population, then we would need to look at the statistics for Fairfax residents as opposed to the overall statistics. And then even at that, there's a question of, well, what, and I did mention earlier the issue with it being small numbers. If you've got 2 of something in a year, there could be one barroom fight that involved 2 people, that's the 2 right there. That doesn't necessarily tell us a whole systemic thing of what's going on in town. So, and that can be challenging because of course there's a lot of confidentiality involved in terms of, you know, we can't really hear the stories of what happened in every situation. But just how we interpret the statistics is also a matter of that's probably somewhat subtle, and we'll probably end up discussing that a fair amount. But I totally agree with the goals, and I really appreciate the goals that I've heard from basically the other 2 members of the committee here, Veronica and Alexandra. Thank you both for what I read as really an openness to, we're not out to nail somebody. We're not out to, you know, what we're out to do is just to understand and see if there's any way that we can improve things. And as I mentioned earlier, one improvement can be just simply more trust. So even improvement isn't necessarily an improvement in the actual things that happen on the ground, but just the trust that the community has and the understanding that people have. So on all those different levels, there's probably room for improvement, especially for people of color in the town. And the goal then being to make this town a more welcoming place for people of color, and therefore increase diversity and make it a better life for everybody.
Can I have a time check, timekeeper?
We have 10 more minutes for this item.
All right, so 10 more minutes and an agenda to still create. It's for a little agenda perspective right now.
Wanted to,
Veronica, yes.
I just wanted to apologize. My son was busting in, asking all types of, whenever I'm in a meeting, he asks more questions because he knows I just want to pacify him. So sorry. But okay, last time we had an hour-and-a-half meeting with Interim Chief Ty Browns, is that correct?
It was, yes, it was the time of your meeting, the whole PPPSA time. I think we scheduled that. Oh, sorry, pardon?
Just asking, do we want to keep it? Is that, Alexandra, your sense that we're going to keep it that length in the communication that you had with him?
I didn't specify time. I said 7 o'clock, but that was my understanding, is that we would keep to our regular meeting, to be aware of our time and also his time, knowing that he also commutes. And so I think it's an hour-and-a-half is a good amount of time, I feel. So we can talk about that, but I feel like holding our regular meeting time would be good.
So last time, I believe, and I apologize if memory is not serving me correctly, you'd scheduled 1 hour for his content because you had another agenda item and you also have public comment, and your entire meeting is only that long. So just as a note, I'm not recommending anything, just a note. So would it be okay if I move this into the planning part of the agenda?
You mean start making the agenda?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes. So outcomes that I heard, there were several, and I'll try to synthesize. So really establish a relationship, continue to establish a relationship, to be able to have difficult conversations, but continue forward movement. And Anne, if you could record some of these, because they'll probably ask me to write it down in a minute and I don't have it written. And then I'll forget what I said. To continue to increase transparency between the community and the police force, and to develop a collective understanding of the current work and how we're going to move forward together in regards to police practices. And leading up towards fulfilling the mission or the purpose of policing practices in Fairfax. Is that an accurate summary? Veronica.
Did I hear you say encourage discourse rather than debate?
Not exactly, but I said have difficult conversations towards a common goal, but that works as well. Discourse works. Dialogue, discourse.
Sounds great to me.
And it really, just to clarify my use of those terms, there's a million definitions out there. For my purposes, when I use them, dialogue discourse's goal is to achieve a greater understanding, a collective greater understanding, oversimplifying a very complex definition. And debate is really about winning your point over another point or argument. And so one of the things really with social justice work, and you all have really requested, is to go deeper and better understand the issues at hand. And so part of my reflection is, and looking at dialogue patterns of this team in RESJ, is to really ensure we're staying in a learning mode and a dialogue discourse mode versus a debate mode. So just to clarify the use of those terms. So if you have an hour roughly, or more if you decide, can you share a little bit about how you're thinking about breaking, given all the questions there are to be asked and your desire for dialogue? What are your thoughts and ideas about agenda items, time, content, etc.? And Alexandra, I was going to just ask you to go first. You read my mind.
So I'm thinking right off my initial thought is that if we start with the first bullet point, which is about statistics, I would be in favor of having that be more of a listening session so we can hear the data. I'm not someone who can then like hear it and then process and then look at other numbers. And so I feel like I would not be ready to have a discussion. I also just think it would be nice to let his number stand and give that time to process for everyone. And then perhaps move towards more of a discussion within the other questions that we gave him. And that's not necessarily that we need to go down the line, but I would like to see a little bit more of a discussion within those questions. So those are my thoughts.
Other thoughts, Veronica?
Yeah, yes to all of that, Alexandra. I'd love to start with the land acknowledgement, of course. And I wonder if we can give a time then for that, him opening essentially, and imagine that could be like 40 minutes. Does that feel like enough time?
I think
Bruce, Alexandra?
I think it might have been about that amount of time that Rico took last time, and it was a little less time than we had our on the agenda. I remember he took a little less time than we had allocated for him.
Maybe we should do 30 minutes then.
In order to think about that, I would need to look at the questions again, because not just that first question, there were a lot of questions. Seemed to cover-
Alexandra, what are your thoughts? Oh, sorry, Bruce, I thought you were done. I apologize. There's a delay.
I'm done.
Okay. We need a signal because sometimes you cut out at the end and then I keep interrupting you. It's like, Alexandra.
Yeah, I do remember him taking a little bit less time than we had planned for. I'm not quite sure if we can count on that happening again. But I do think 40 minutes is good. I was just about to count the difference between the first meeting's questions and the second, to see if there's how those play out, if there were more questions and now there's less, or the other way around, because of course that will determine time. But I think 40 minutes is good.
Down with that.
And that might be a question you ask of him in your planning. Because what we'll do is then we'll have the co-planning chair where I meet with chairs to plan the agenda, and that might be information to bring back to inform it.
Bruce has a question.
Bruce.
Yes. As I recall from the questions, they cover the first set of questions were all on either a personal level or kind of personal level to the department. And so there was a certain amount of overlap among them. And some of the questions, even though they were fairly specific, were fairly quick in their answer. Like, does the department do certain kinds of training? And the answer was yes, absolutely. And that didn't take that long to say. And these questions not only get into statistics, which could take some time, but then there are also other questions like, what does the department do with the rapid response team or the rapid crisis unit? I think that's really an important thing to explore. That could be a whole discussion in itself, that mobile crisis unit, in my opinion. But that's a whole different topic than statistics or police actions in Fairfax. That's one of the possible solutions, or one of the possible things we might explore, is the mobile crisis unit. And there's another one similar to that with regard to the utilization of the juvenile
Restorative justice.
restorative justice is the term. So there's three big topics right there, and not looking at the questions, I'm not recalling whether there might be others. So I think there's a lot of ground to cover, and a lot of fruitful ground. Those two especially are, I think, very fruitful ground for us to cover. And they're actually very different from each other, from those two, from talking about the statistics, and that the statistics, there could be a tendency for that to get into a debate, and which I totally agree that's not where we want to go. But the other two, I think, are just exploring something that we're probably all in a lot of agreement on. And the question is, what recommendations might we make, and what might policy do to move forward on some of those issues? So they're very different, is my point. And I don't know whether even putting them all into the same meeting, we can touch on them, but we're probably not going to finish those discussions in one meeting. Thanks.
Anne, could you bring up the questions again, please?
Just want to say we're past
Oh.
we're out of time.
Thank you, Veronica. So we're at time. Would you like to add time for this item to be completed, or move it to your next meeting? I'll need to hear from folks.
I'd love to,
Veronica.
I think we can wrap it up in a couple of minutes here.
Okay, Alexandra, what are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, Bruce?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So if we have roughly an hour plus a few minutes, you have 40 minutes for your listening session with the statistics. And I heard a request from multiple folks to have some discussion. So I'm curious, what are you interested in terms of a discussion, and how would you like to have that structured? And I'm going to start with Alexandra.
So I'm wondering if now I'm kind of having heard everything, I'm wondering if we could drop that 40 minutes down to maybe like 30, just so that we can have time for discussion. And as Bruce had mentioned, these are pretty specific questions that I would hope that we can really get into. Also, with acknowledging that we may not get to all of them in this second meeting with him. So I'm wondering how people feel about 30 minutes for statistics, and then having perhaps, I don't know if he goes through what he's prepared for the rest of the questions, and then we kind of follow along, take notes, and then open up a dialogue. So let's see, 30, and then like, I don't know, 15 and 15 for an hour, or do we want to push towards an hour and a half? That's my proposal.
Just to reiterate, so I'm clear to Alex.
I'm going to have you, Veronica, I'm going to have you wait. It's such a small group. We can continue raising hands, or we can just unmute yourselves. It's so small. So I'm open to either, but we do have an agreement to raise hands. So Veronica, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to recap to make sure that I understood. Alexandra, 30 minutes for Interim Chief Tabranza to speak to the statistics and what information he feels like has been misinformation and what he would like to say differently. And then 15 minutes for 15 and 15, was that mobile crisis unit? Well, yeah, what was the 15 and 15?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we could kind of go over specifically like what questions, or I was thinking, because he has all of these, so I know he's been looking at them. And so perhaps 15 minutes for him to kind of go through the questions. And then 15 minutes seems short for a discussion, but some kind of discussion just to get that dialogue going, I think is important. Yeah.
So a note on past timing, I think you ran about an hour. Public comment has not ever gone more than 15 minutes max. So you have about 15 minutes to play with. I'm creating an agenda on paper and I'll read it back to you, but just to plan it out. And last time you had given him the questions to prepare, and that seemed to work both for him and for all of you. So I think that's what Alexandra said, to help him know what time frame he has would be helpful.
And could you scroll
Bruce.
up a bit, because I don't think we've even seen all the questions yet. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe we.
I know it's so hard when we're a small group. Veronica.
Maybe we can wrap this, just a reminder, timekeeper over here, if we can come to a consensus around it. I like what you just said, Alexandra, around 30 minutes to address statistics, 15 minutes for any other questions that he is going to be answering along this, or any other things that you'd like to say, and then 15 minutes for us to have dialogue with him. And I'm would love to suggest even more within those 15 minutes of our discussion to feel more framed, that perhaps for equity, that we each get equal amount, I think it's important for us each to be able to ask questions, that are alive for us. And so just kind of split that time up depending on who is there at that point on our subcommittee, if it's just us 3 or if it's now 4 or 5 members, that we can kind of split that time to be able to have any other questions that are needing to be asked. Does that feel good?
So can I challenge you a bit? May I? Okay. So based on facilitating this group, there is a strong leaning towards a lot of dialogue. So I think it's great if you think that 15 minutes is realistic. I don't have skin in this game, with the exception of helping you accomplish your goals. And so if you think 15 minutes is not going to be realistic, just a point to think about. And an additional point is that equity doesn't mean equal in the case, speaking of social justice. And so I don't want to have any misunderstandings about if you want equal time, that's different than equitable time. So Veronica, if you can, do you mind waiting just 1 second? I'm going to just try to create some space for other folks. Bruce.
Well, I just continue as I look at these questions to feel like this is a lot of area here. And so it sounds to me like what I heard, what I understood Alexandra to propose sounds fine, but I would envision that it might not cover all the areas that we want to cover. So maybe what might come out of our comments might be things like, this is something that particularly piques our interest and we'd like to go deeper into that in a future meeting. That might be one of the outcomes, as opposed to resolving these all in one night, because this is just a lot of territory. It's great. It's a great list of questions, but it's a lot to cover. So, and again, the statistics question is kind of different from the others, because that's been something that there's already a feeling, I think, of wanting to get deeper into it and wanting to understand what is there, whereas the others are things we haven't even really begun to explore in public, and they might have a very different tone to them. That's it.
Alexandra, what are your thoughts? And then Veronica.
Yeah, so I agree that these are long questions. And I mean, we could have a full discussion for an hour on each of them, I think. But so in effort to move the agenda along, if we did 30 minutes for the statistics and then 20 and 20, or even 25 for discussion, just being more realistic, I think that makes sense to me. And also perhaps when I email him about, well, we had said time, but maybe what I can propose to him is that these are our list of questions, and if he can, or if he would like to order them based on what he feels or deems more important, or that he feels strongly he would like to speak on in this meeting, then if we were to run out of time, we aren't cutting him off before he says something that he is wanting very badly to say. And so maybe that's a way that we can say, okay, 20 minutes is our time limit. If we don't get to all the questions we will, of course, meet with him again if he would like. But that way we're prioritizing what he wants to prioritize. And then we can still have that 25-minute discussion. And it's possible that other questions we didn't get to come up, or we solely talk about the questions that did come up, but I think that then gives him a heads up. And so that's what I would propose.
Can I, a clarifying question? I got lost on the amount of time so I have listening for 30, and then him around the statistics, and then him answering the rest of the specific questions for 20, and then open dialogue with members for 25. Is that your proposal?
Yeah.
Okay. And a question for everybody on the dialogue. What is your preferred dialogue structure? Just so we have common understanding going into the time together, and we can set ourselves up for success. Alexandra.
So what I'm thinking is, because I want to be aware that there are multiple of us and one of him. And so I'm trying to think about how to approach this, because my initial thought is, if there are any thoughts that we have, perhaps we can just go back down the list. But I'm curious what other people think, just in the acknowledging that there are multiple of us and one of him.
Other thoughts? Veronica.
I think that we can make space for, I appreciate that, you raising that, Alexandra. We can make sure to continue to allow him to have space to talk and not feel like we're bombarding him. I guess my initial suggestion was more around equal opportunity to maybe each of us get to ask one last feedback question, or not even one last, but to have a few minutes where we each are getting the opportunity to provide deeper questions if there are more left from what he shares, would be my suggestion, and that he gets ample amount of time to respond to each of us beyond that. So 3 minutes each to ask him a question, or ask him more, engage in dialogue with him, would be my suggestion.
Can I make a suggestion about a possible way to handle that? So as you're listening, what if all of you come up with your top, you won't be able to ask every question. So the idea is just to prioritize. If you come up as you're listening with your top 5 most urgent questions, we decide on an amount of time per person. We can do both. The idea of a whip around is that everybody has an opportunity that's sort of protected time. And so you could either choose to ask 3 questions, open time, option A, or option B is, say Alexandra has 5 minutes and whatever gets covered, gets covered. That would give you, depending on our members at the time, that would give you anywhere from 15 to 20 to 25. And if you have more time, you could open it up for, I think there's a benefit to free dialogue in terms of building understanding between people. And so I would recommend leaving some time for open, free-flowing dialogue, just to build community, relationship, and understanding. Veronica?
I vote for option B.
Other thoughts? And can I have a time check, Veronica?
We're way past our time.
That part I was clear on. How far are we? 10 minutes over?
We are 20 minutes.
15? Okay, thank you. Other thoughts on the dialogue part, just to close this out?
I don't know what
Okay.
option. is.
Alexandra, just a sec, Bruce, Alexandra had her hand up. Go ahead, Alexandra.
Sorry, I just really quickly was gonna ask, can we clarify what option B was?
Mhm.
Go ahead, Veronica.
My understanding was that it was, we each have a whip around opportunity where we each have a few minutes, maybe 3 minutes, 4 minutes each, depending on how many of us there are. And I think we can solidify this in our next meeting based on how many members we have in our subcommittee at that moment. That we each get 3 minutes to address what it is we want to, not like we each get 3 questions, but we're just going to have this dialogue where one of us has the floor for those 3 minutes engaging with interim chief Tabranza and then somebody else. I'm kind of pulling off of what I've seen town council do when they have folks come on to town council meetings where you each get like a time to be engaging with them. Sometimes a council member will say, hey, I have a question over here too, but generally like one person gets to engage at a time. That was what I was, yeah.
Okay, I got a thumbs up from Alexandra. Bruce, are you good with that?
Yeah, I think I understand that. Yes, that sounds good.
So I'm unclear, Patrice, if you're here as a member or if you've resigned. If you're here as a member, I want to consider your input. I'm not sure.
Hey, Patrice.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we're just, we have a final agenda.
Yeah, I've been listening. I am resigning. As the sole African American member of this committee, I am resigning. At the last town council meeting, I think there were probably 7 committee members who called Veronica a racist. I agree. I don't want to be on a committee where we're railroading our new chief. He has done everything.
Patrice,
And that's why I'm resigning. I don't have a place in this committee. Black people don't have a place in this committee. And you guys go on with your bad selves and do whatever you want, but I actually don't want to be a part of this anymore.
I would really like to make time and space for what you need in relation to communicating with the committee. But we're right in the middle of a process for item B. And the committee has made a commitment to really focus on achieving our goals of each item in the interest of.
So why are we?
Can you please wait, Patrice?
I'm sorry, but the town council has spoken. The town council has spoken, and we are still 6 steps behind. That's why I'm resigning. We're not addressing the fact that we report into the town council.
So we've made a commitment to accomplish our agenda items, and I care very much about the concerns that Patrice has brought forward. In the interest of our common agreement that was made prior to her arriving, I am going to ask that we finish item B. And if time would like to be placed on a future agenda to address her concerns, of course, we're more than able to do that. May I have the team's permission to do this? Bruce.
If I can just say really quickly, to Patrice and to us all that we reporting to town council with recommendations or whatever we think we've understood.
So Bruce, I'm sorry. Can I pause you for just a second? I think that we need to make a team decision right now before we get sidetracked. It is a very important discussion. I very much respect that you want to answer her question, but we have an agreement on the agenda. And so is it possible to answer the question before everybody about how we proceed?
Yeah, I was just
then,
that is why we need to work on this agenda, work through this agenda. I support what you're saying.
okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't understand that was where you were going.
Where we're trying to go is to have something to report, and we won't get there if we don't stay on.
Thank you. I appreciate you pushing back and clarifying that for me. Okay, so we have agreement that I'm going to go ahead and move us on to finish this item B, agenda item. Alexandra.
Yeah, I'm in full support of moving forward, but I don't want to move forward until we acknowledge that we cannot have accusations made that someone on our committee is a racist. So I want to acknowledge that we are all entitled to feel how we feel, but this is a public space. And quite frankly, none of us get a free pass to disrespect each other. And so acknowledging that, I want to acknowledge that I respect everyone who is present here. And I think everyone deserves respect here. And with that, I think I would love to move forward.
Thank you so much for that, Alexandra. You took my next few words right out of my mouth. So I very much appreciate you lifting up your own voice on behalf of the comment made. And I appreciate you acknowledging the comment and encouraging us all to have respect for our fellow members, to respect each other with active listening and honoring of personal accounts, and maintaining level of reflection towards our other members. So thank you so much for that. So the agenda that we have on the table is we will listen to statistics for 30 minutes approximately, and then we will have 20 minutes for him to answer questions. So it's about 50 minutes total listening to Interim Chief Tabaransa. And then we will have 25 minutes for open dialogue, where we'll do a whip around first. Everybody will have an allocated amount of time to ask their top questions, and then we'll open it up for dialogue so everybody can have some free time for dialogue. Can I get a thumbs up from everyone so I can see y'all? We got 3 out of 4. All right, so when we move forward next week, Alexandra and I will be finalizing the agenda. And so we will include these items on the agenda. And I'd like to actually just ask that one of our norms is to honor somatic reflection. So I'd just like to ask us all to take a really deep breath and hold that breath for a count of 3. And then let it out for a count of 5. Drop your shoulders down. Shake them out just a little bit. Reset that neck. Oh, I saw Bruce do a good neck twist. We could all do a little neck twist. All right. Veronica, I'd just like to offer you an opportunity if you feel like you need to lift up your own voice, and then we'll move on to item C.
Thanks, Lisa. First, I'd love to, Anne, if you're right there, to get the document off the thing so we could see each other's faces more. Thank you, Alexandra, also for what you shared. And Patrice, I have a hope that you would receive my invitation to connect as a person with me. I'm hear that you have said that you feel like I am racist, and that I know that I have racist, gnarly monsters that I am surrounded by in this culture and that I have inside of my bones. And I am working really hard to eradicate that, and I am definitely prone to making mistakes. And so I would love to engage with you outside of a public forum. If you felt like you wanted to have mediation, I'm very happy to have somebody else there that you feel safe with, to talk more with you about in what ways you feel like I could improve. And I also I have a dream of being able to, if we continue to work together, that you and I can have healthy conflict. And would love to figure out how to do that. Conflict that does not include racism.
Thank you for that, Veronica. So what I'm going to ask is that we go ahead and continue on to item C. And I want to just make the public statement that I very much acknowledge the seriousness of the comments that were made, the emotion, Veronica, your grace in responding to the comments. We live in a society steeped in racism. You would be hard pressed to find anybody who is not racist, classist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, classist, or perhaps engaging in religious discrimination on some level, in some part of themselves. And so our common work is to unearth those things that we're trying to interrupt, and we all hold them, and we all have common work to do. So I want to locate the conversation in a much larger conversation around how we hold self-awareness, which is one of our norms, to engage in anti-racist practices. So I'd like to encourage you both to touch base outside of the meeting, as you mentioned. That was one of the things that we discussed, being able to have conversations outside of the meeting, and I'm here to support whatever you might need from me in that regard. But because there was a collective request to ensure that we move through agendas and we are engaging in action that moves us towards a common purpose, with great respect for what was brought up and the importance and significance of that, I'm going to make a recommendation that any conversations that need to are held, as you mentioned, Veronica, and offered together, and or that be used as an agenda item that we can plan adequate time for. I would not want to shortchange that very important conversation by trying to squeeze it in and not do it justice here tonight. So with your permission, I'd like to move forward with great respect and your permission to the survey item C. Does this team, can I get a thumbs up just to, Bruce, are you good to move forward? Okay. So item C is simply a discussion. We have 15 minutes time, Kipa. And if you'll give us a 3-minute warning, warnings are really helpful. So we'll was open discussion for a potential community survey. I think this is incredibly relevant when you're looking at data sets. What is the data and anecdotal, qualitative, and quantitative from the communities to inform achieving your purpose? And then a request was to specifically, the goal of the discussion would be to identify next steps with relation to a survey. So go ahead and open it up and we'll just have open dialogue. We're such a small group tonight. Alexandra, do you want to start us off?
Bruce had his hand up, so Bruce, do you want to go
Oh,
ahead?
did I miss it? I wasn't ignoring you, Bruce. I was looking at my agenda.
I don't feel ignored.
Good.
If it might be appropriate for me to just report, probably all of you have heard this, but what came out of the council discussion for as part of the process of evaluating the hiring of interim Chief Tabaranza as chief. So part of that was to conduct a community survey, and this is what was written for me by Garrett as a summary of what was decided that night. Conduct a community survey to, one, ask for comments regarding qualities in a police chief, and second, allow for the submittal of questions for the council to consider asking the interim police chief. So this would be part of the interview process. And then the third is to allow for comments regarding rethinking and reimagining police services for the PPPSA to discuss and consider. So that is kind of, as I understand that, that was kind of a survey that would go out to the community that the town would do that could inform this committee, the PPPSA. That last part said allow for comments regarding rethinking and reimagining for the PPPSA to discuss and consider. But you could think of it the other way too, that if this committee wanted to take this opportunity right now, there's a survey that is going to be created and going to go out to the town. And if we wanted to give any input as to, questions or thoughts about that survey, that would be an opportunity. It doesn't have to preclude doing another survey later or something, but this is just, I just thought I'd put that out, that there's a survey being talked about in another context as well. And I think, just speaking as my understanding on the council and that council discussion, what this process was, the community panel and then this community survey, both were opportunities to bring in some community dialogue and enhance community understanding while going through the process of evaluating and hiring a police chief. So that was the point of this. That was why these things were being done, was primarily to open it up to the community and increase the depth of what we can gain from this process, which sounds like it's a complete overlap with the goals of this committee.
Alexandra.
So with this survey being drafted and agreeing with Bruce that it overlaps, I would absolutely welcome the opportunity to work with town council. I know that creating a relationship and building a relationship with town council was something that had also been requested, I think 2 meetings ago. So it feels like perhaps this is like a first step in that third part, asking for comments about police practice, like alternatives, could be a resource for us to maybe draft another survey down the line. But it seems like it would make it hard for us to get responses if we put out a survey at the same time or shortly after town council. And so it seems like it would be productive for both of us to put out one survey that had a common goal, and it sounds like this one does. So those are my thoughts.
Other thoughts? And perhaps other thoughts with an eye towards next steps. gentle nudge. I think I saw Bruce's hand first and then Veronica. And if I
hear from Veronica, and then I do have.
okay. Okay. He's like, I rebel against your order of calling. Okay. Veronica, yes.
We should each have a chance to talk. Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
There was a really helpful, I'm really excited about the way in which I still feel excited about a survey that's very in depth about public safety alternatives. I'm curious, I think the questionnaire that I was hearing in the town council meeting was maybe going to be limited to around 10 questions. And I believe that we have way more than 10 questions that we can ask about public safety and policing specifically. So would kind of caution us against just like letting this be the survey that we've been visioning, but feel excited about the way that it might inform a larger survey that we can do. And feel excited, Bruce, what's your take on how many questions, if you can just give me a number, and then I have a few more statements I want to make, but how many questions do you think could be focused on reimagine or on public safety alternatives?
Well, that was kind of what I wanted to give thoughts on. Yeah, I feel like, to what you were saying about this not being the ideas you're hearing on the council not being necessarily as many questions and as much detail, I agree. I would not propose that the proposed council survey be the survey. I think that this council survey could be kind of an opening survey. And if you don't mind me going on for a second here, sort of the creative process is often, and that's what I'd like us to do, is really be creative. And the creative process often begins by opening the funnel, really getting a lot of ideas on the table. And then you narrow them down and start to find where you want to go with them. And so this could be good for opening it up. This last bullet point, as was written by Garrett, allow for comments regarding rethinking and reimagining PD services for us to discuss and consider. That could just be phrased as open-ended question or questions that just gather from townspeople, what ideas do you have? And then that's not the final thing. That's just some things for us to think about that we may not have thought about. So that's kind of how I would think about this.
Great, thanks for that clarification. So I'm seeing that as a step that feels like related, but now what do we do with the survey that we're visioning putting together and kind of getting to work on that? And I'd still love to focus on that.
Okay.
You know, I'm really excited about what we'll be able to ask. And I sent this email out, a resource from Strategies for Policing Innovation. And they have incredible questions already provided, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and found an incredible pilot project, or not even pilot project, but a sister project, a public safety community outreach project that happened in Hayward, right in the East Bay, that also went through a whole process of engaging with their community members and how to make sure that they had representation, not just from folks who show up to town council meetings or participate in committees, but also folks who don't have the time to make these types of meetings happen, and how to make sure that we're getting their input. And that feels like a really important thing to center and focus on as we think about what our survey could be. And I'm just going to share two of my favorite questions already. Not favorite, but that would just help us get to the point of why this committee was formed under the Racial Equity and Social Justice Committee, which are racial ethnic differences and attitudes towards the police is the subtitle. And the question is, do you think the officer treated you differently because of your race, ethnicity, age, or gender? Those are the types of questions that I feel like would really give us the information that we're looking for. And if it's everybody's feels like everything's wonderful, then great. That's what we wanted to hear. So just the questions like that are the ones that I'm hoping we can put on a survey that, you know, takes folks no more than 15 minutes to fill out. And I'm curious, I feel like we need a whole, an entire meeting, many of them, to really do that well. And so would urge us to consider having that be the next thing we do after our meeting with Interim Chief Tabaranza, if not the meeting between now and then, that we like all our agendas focused on the survey and designing it.
Thank you. Can I get a time check? I know we're almost at 8:30. Where are we for this section?
We have 4 minutes and 12 seconds left.
Okay, thank you. Bruce?
I'll pass for now.
Okay. So in terms of next steps, what would you, that was one of the goals of this time. What would you like to see as next step? Bruce?
Do we have any specific input to this council or staff designed survey that's going out? Because now would be the time, I think. If not, that's fine.
So I hear a next step of somebody following up, and if you'll capture this for our items for next meeting, or sorry, next steps, for someone following up to find out if PPPSA can have input. Did I capture that correctly, Bruce?
Well, it says to continue reading what Garrett sent, the survey will be available on March 29th, or maybe sooner, and close on April 26th.
Sweetheart, I'm still.
This would be the meeting, actually, not next meeting, if we're going to give any input content of that survey. That's what I meant. Was like next steps now tonight would be, if we want to, if we have anything to say about that, now's the time.
Alexandra, do you want to jump in? And then Veronica?
Yeah, so I'm in full agreement with Veronica and Bruce. I think in terms of for tonight, the survey, I guess I think the question, what I'm understanding is, on the survey, would people be asked like an open-ended question with like a text box that says, what are your thoughts on alternative police practice or alternative ways of policing? And then versus us submitting like a question with maybe like A, B, or C, all of the above type question. So I guess that's my understanding. And so I'm wondering, I suppose I would be in favor for an open-ended question just to gauge where the community is at right now. And then we can kind of use that to inform the development of our survey in the future.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
All right. Anne, did you capture that? Okay. Okay. Are you good on next steps? Do you want to add any more next steps before I close this item?
I'm just wondering who's going to follow up with that next step.
I'm happy to pass that on to Garrett.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that you just have to make sure that there's an open-ended question with what Alexandra had just said.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay.
Veronica.
I just had the burning question around, it's different from what you asked, Lisa. So that's a question to Bruce about that survey. Can I ask it?
No.
Yeah. I'm not trying to control the agenda. I'm just trying to move you along towards your goals. That's all.
Yeah,
Please.
just curious, Bruce, and if you could convey that. I imagine it's already being fully thought of, but just to make sure, because it deserves repeating, to be conscious of how that survey is going to be accessible to people, especially if people don't have access to the internet, and how long it'll be open for them to answer, and just to make sure that that's something that staff is conscious of. Yeah, thank you.
Something that's been mentioned in past meetings is Spanish translation.
Okay. I'll bring that up. Yeah.
Anne, yeah. Anne?
Yeah, I do know that Camille is the web person, so she'll be the one that would be putting this survey together from a access point of view. So I know that that usually goes out in the newsletter every Friday. So that is just something that happens.
Mhm.
Something for your consideration, just related to the lens of this committee, is that if you're providing only a written survey, you're privileging the literacy of folks who have literacy to be able to respond, and you're excluding a subset of our population. So it might be something for you to consider in terms of access.
And Bruce, just as a staff member, I would just get really clear with Garrett on how it's all going to happen.
Right. But it's with this time frame, that won't be able to come back to this committee, because the survey, according to this time frame, the survey would be well underway by the next committee. So, but I'm writing down these concerns, and you can certainly help me and to make sure that we caught them all. And any of you that want to email through and email anything further to just make sure that our thoughts here got written down, I will definitely pass them on to Garrett. And I appreciate them. Yeah. Yeah, how surveys are administered is definitely a major issue in terms of what results you get. And
In terms of your goal, it's actually a critical issue.
mhm.
Feels like a lot of incentive for our survey.
All right, are we good to move on to public comment? Last thoughts? Got a thumbs up to move on? All right, thank you, Veronica. Are you good, Bruce, to move on? Got a solid next step. We met our goal for B, we met our goal for C.
That was quick and efficient. Thank you. Thank you all.
What, Bruce?
That was good. I really appreciated that discussion. We kind of came up with really quickly that we had to talk about this, and I think we did very well with it. So thank you all.
I think in terms of process observation, you're doing a phenomenal job kind of shifting gears from the length of time you spend on dialogue to the length of time that you're getting to action items. So just a point of reflection there for your growth as a team. We have public comment coming up next. So public comment for items on the agenda. Anne, do you want to take the reins?
Okay, I'll try. I have Dee Lee. Go ahead, Dee. You have 3 minutes, okay? Hello?
Why don't we take her off, go to the next person, and we can circle back to her before we close this section, but please remind me, I'll forget.
Okay, so then the next person's hand is John and Jane.
Hello, committee members. John Romatis, Fairfax resident. First time, checking this meeting out. Very interesting. I'll try and be productive with my comments. However, in the beginning, I was a little dismayed to hear Ms. Jimenez call out somebody. They didn't want somebody to do something because of the color of their skin. I forget, I caught it, just kind of perked up. I think that's not normal. We shouldn't normalize that type of thing. It's divisive. It puts people, you start calling people out by color. It's not cool. It's not cool. I don't think it's cool. If you don't agree. Anyway, so I was looking at the questions. I just wanted to kind of chime in on the questions and these questions that we're going to be asked of Tab Renz. And I just want to say that they seem a little one-sided. They're very kind of they almost seem like they're to sort of elicit a response. Perhaps I could make a suggestion that if you are going to ask questions such as these, maybe there's like a statement of reasons why, like, like, why are you asking these questions? Like, what are you trying to get at? Like I said, it's almost, they seem a little like they're interrogating, like here, I took a picture, it says, are police officers trauma informed, given that most people within Fairfax have experienced some form of trauma? I mean, is that true? So, I mean, it's like, what do you, are you trying to say something? I think it would be helpful if you maybe had a little bit of more of like a reason why you're asking that question. Why are you getting there? Maybe that would help further the conversation, because it seems, like I said, a little one-sided. And yeah, well, thank you guys for doing what you're doing. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll try Lee again. Lee, you there?
Be Deborah Benson, I believe.
D. Lee, yeah.
She's had her hand up since the beginning, and so I'm wondering maybe if it was an accident.
Okay, so Joe, you're up next.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you all for being here this evening. Yeah, and all the work that you're putting in. And yeah, I just wanted to add an idea about the statistics piece, and it's kind of in the same spirit as providing Interim Chief Tabaranza with the questions that maybe you all could be provided with the data prior to, because I think that's the crux of a lot of the tension right now, is that the data isn't being made public. And despite this is being asked for all summer long, and I don't know that there was an elected official in, I mean, not to call you out, Bruce, or any elected official, but it would have helped if there would have been some folks requesting the data on arrests and categorized by race, so that we could really get into it, because there's a feeling like it's being held, but just in that spirit that perhaps the data could be provided to you folks prior to, so that, as Bruce said, there's a lot of ways to analyze it, so that there could be some real dialogue around the different perspectives of analyzing data. And it could be a very fruitful conversation, rather than just having kind of a presentation given to you. You could take part in it a little bit. And then just want to caution against the kind of I guess, small numbers and anomalies, and just those are products of the racial disparity of the county. That's so, to just be careful as we look at normally in the statistical world, that would, yeah, you would that small numbers could be considered anomalies, and but right now that's a product of the system. That's kind of how we've gotten to this place, and so we really need to look at the small numbers, because that's where possibly the harm is being done. And then yeah, just that the survey, that's all sounds really great, and I just had an idea when Lisa spoke about, translation and literacy, and that I don't know if it's going to be open to folks who work in town, that, we have, close to 100 people who come from the 94901 zip code in the canal to work, and are here for a lot of time, and bring their families to town, and maybe have experiences that might be valuable too. And just wondering if the survey is also, if folks are going to identify race in it, because people's different experiences based on their race, I think is an important part of the survey. So once again, thanks for all your work.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's it. That's all I'm seeing.
I have John's hands up again. Hunter,
So okay, Hunter. So he already had his time.
But that could be Jane. Jane and John use the same call-in.
okay. So
Okay.
I'm gonna go for Hunter. Hunter, go ahead and talk. You have 3 minutes.
Hey, I just want to say thank you first off for all of the work that this committee is doing. It's definitely not easy work and not always the most lighthearted of work. So I appreciate all of the effort and time that's being put in, both on the town side of supporting this work and also on this committee side of spending time and hours to be here. I just wanted to speak in favor of the questions and the discussion that you all are having with the interim chief. I think the point that was made earlier of discussion and dialogue versus debate, and I think my hope would be that any police chief of any town or city would be open to having that sort of discussion and dialogue with their community members and with their residents. So I think it's a great first step in understanding a little more about this interim chief and about exactly what the such a large percentage of the budget of the town is going towards. So I applaud you all for that work, and I think just listening tonight, I think you all will approach it from a compassionate place and a place of understanding. I particularly want to commend Veronica for her grace and compassion in tonight's meeting. I think shows that you are a very valued member of this community and of this committee as well. And also Alexandra for your comments in response to Patrice's comments. So I think, yeah, I think it's not railroading the captain at all, interim captain. I think it is a valuable discussion and dialogue. So I commend you all for doing the work, and thank you.
Okay, great. There is a call-in user. I don't know the person's name, but call-in user, go ahead.
Can they go ahead and state their name before commenting?
Hello, Deborah Benson. I live in Fairfax.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am not watching this meeting right now. My computer is starting over and over and over again. I would like to speak to a point of comportment. Your committee is a subcommittee of a committee appointed by an elected body, the town council, and you are doing the work of the people. And I would appreciate not having to watch your mastication and tending to your bodily functions during the meeting. If you could have your dinner before or after this meeting, it would be much appreciated. So that's just sort of a more than I want to see comment. So going on to the issues that you've raised, I saw one of the questions was asking interim chief and now to be chief Tabarenzo. There were 10% of the stops resulted in convictions, and you were going to ask him what happened to the other 90%. Well, that's a really big question with a lot of really big answers. I think that's kind of over the top. You also all referred to hearing the community at the town council meeting asking for certain things, and I really feel like this. I'm not even sure how many people are on this committee. I see 3 there tonight, but I keep hearing people referred to who don't show up or haven't shown up. I wonder how many of you live here and know the history of the police and the community. And I would say, I know in many 12-step programs, one of the first steps, maybe the first one, I don't know, is take an inventory. So I would say, and this was mentioned by a council member recently, that this 90% figure, 90% probably of the community really loves our police force and holds them up as a shining example of how other police forces might behave. We're incredibly diverse.
50 seconds left.
Okay. Let's see, what else did I have to say?
And she
I
doesn't
guess-
have her screen on to see the time warnings. If you'll just
No, I
verbally
do not.
say 30.
So thank you. Oh, the other thing about the questions you guys had, I'll just finish with this, is the reading list, asking interim chief to attend to the books on the reading list is very assumptive. It's assuming that he's a little bit ignorant and prejudiced and needs to be educated. So I have a problem with that. Thank you for whatever good intent you're portraying here in this, but thank you. I guess I'm done. Thanks a lot for the time warning.
Okay.
You want to check Ann and see if this is Jane that wants to have public comment? Thanks, Bruce, for letting us know that.
Hi, yes.
Okay, wonderful. I'm so glad Bruce caught that.
It's confusing, and thank you, Bruce. The rest of you couldn't possibly have known. Thank you for listening to me. I just wanted to say, in the list of your questions, I have a real problem with the first question. I'm wondering who wrote this question and what factual information is it based on? It says, officers trauma informed, given that most people within Fairfax have experienced some sort of trauma. Is that supposed to be trauma in their life or trauma from the police department? Or what are we talking about here? Does that mean every single citizen in Fairfax walking around is suffering from some trauma experience that the police need to know how to deal with? That just seems like a loaded question. I don't know, whoever wrote that question had an agenda. I don't like that question. I don't think that's a good one, but that's my personal opinion. Secondly, I just want to say it also feels like all of this is somehow weighted in terms of ignoring just the regular plain people that live in Fairfax and have lived here, as I have lived here for 40 years. I've never had a problem with the police department. I love them. I think we have the gold standard of the police department. And I kind of resent that they're being lumped in with the same kind of grid over them as the police in the entire nation are. We're not the same as everybody else. We're a small town. We don't have the same issues that big cities have. We're not Oakland. We're not Richmond. We're not San Francisco. We're not even San Rafael. We're Fairfax. We can't deal with the problems of the entire Bay Area. I hope we're trying to just simply deal with Fairfax. If we can keep Fairfax fair, and I like a lot of people have to get up early and go to work in the morning, and they haven't got time to stay up late for the meetings, and they're not even aware of what's going on, but they're happy living their lives, and they're not going to be unhappy if they wake up and find everything changed. And lastly, I was sorry to see Patrice leave in such a way. I wish that could have been a different happening, and I hope that perhaps it might have a different outcome. She had a good voice. She got hot under the collar, and these are hard times for everybody. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we are down. We are good. No hands.
Okay. So we had agreed that
I've actually had my hand up the whole time.
we're taking.
Okay, I was doing attendees, Patrice.
I am no longer a member of this committee.
Okay, so do you want me to have her take the comment here? Lisa?
So let's go ahead and bring her in as a panelist. She has to put it in writing for it to be official, is my understanding. Bruce, I'd ask you to weigh in on that. I don't want to misstate. And I want to be really mindful and respectful with these choices right now.
I would say that if it's not a requirement that she put it in writing as long as it be clear, but then the committee puts it in writing. So let's just make sure it's very, very clear, Patrice. And then if that's the case, then I guess we should go ahead just out of trying to hear more input rather than less, to have 3 minutes for public comment for Patrice now, since she had her hand up. And Patrice, the reason your hand wasn't seen is because it's on a different screen if you're a panelist, and so that's why it wasn't seen. That would be my judgment. Just to go.
Okay,
Do you want
so
me to remove, put Patrice into?
You don't have to.
no.
Okay.
So let me clarify. Thank you for clarifying, Bruce. So if we don't need it in writing, I just want to state for the record that my understanding, Patrice, is that you have resigned from PPSA.
That is correct.
Okay. And so I just want to ask our members.
Well, I guess I should point out, or I should surmise here, that other members of the RESJ wouldn't be able to comment. Well, we haven't really had that happen, so I'm not sure I know the answer to that question, whether other members of the RESJ can comment to the PPPSA in public comment time.
Would you guys like me to write something right now so that I can speak? Because I'm resigning.
No, I think that the question is about whether or not RESJ members would go into public comment and comment. If you're not a PPSA member, then you would be a RESJ member. And
no, I'm a member of nothing. I've resigned from both.
You've resigned from both PPPSA and RESJ?
That is correct, and I'll put it in writing tomorrow.
Okay, I mean, we want to hear what you have to say. I'm just trying to make sure that I follow the appropriate process to ensure fairness to everybody. So thank you for your patience while we figure this out. So we'll accept that resignation. I want to just check that our other members understand that as well. So Veronica, just a thumbs up would be enough to say you understand Patrice is resigning from both RESJ and PPSA? And Alexandra and Bruce?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and dismiss with the formality of removing her. That seems excessive to me. And so let's go ahead and keep her on the screen as she is. And then I'll ask that you give the 3-minute reminder. So she'll have 3 minutes for public comment.
Okay, and then 2 other hands have popped up in the public as well. So just.
Okay, so she'll have 3 minutes, and then at 3 minutes, we'll go ahead and take the rest of the hands.
Okay, Patrice, you got 3 minutes.
I guess I'd like to start by saying that, Veronica, I didn't call you a racist. I think that was evident in the last town council meeting where I believe 5 to 7 people called you a racist because of what you were saying. Now I want to say that I've felt that the whole time I've been on this committee. I felt like as an African-American, my voice doesn't count. My voice doesn't matter. And Veronica or Alexandra, so sorry, but we've done nothing since July. We've accomplished nothing. So maybe we could take our motions, or your motions rather, and look at the last town council meeting and build off of that. Like, you guys are still acting like you're a rebel ship. Like, the town council decided Rico is the only one who will be interviewed for these positions. So the fact that you just spent 45 minutes talking about your questions, to me, is why I'm resigning. We're not doing anything. If you want to ask Chief Tabaranza questions, then work with the town council and bundle your questions with theirs. They're about to interview him, but it seems like no one pays attention to the town. And Bruce, you're the exception. You were on the meeting, you heard everything that was said. And I just want to say I'm resigning as an African American who does not feel like they belong on this committee. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Patrice.
So Anne, if you could remove her now as a panelist, and then we'll go ahead and so we can take the other comments.
Okay.
And if not, don't worry about it. Let's just move on.
No, she's now in attendees.
Great.
We have Jess and Naomi with hands up. So Jess, you go first. You have 3 minutes.
Hey, thanks for doing this tonight, guys. Really appreciate the work that you're doing. You're all striving for anti-racism, and it's beautiful and scary, and I just really respect it. As far as asking questions for Fairfax police, you know, I think it's a great idea. You know, we have a great police force here, sure, but it doesn't mean that we can't ask them questions and evolve alongside of them. So anyway, thanks a lot for what you're doing. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. And Naomi, you are on. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being there tonight. I'm sorry I signed on a bit late, so I missed a lot of the first part of the meeting. And so I may be repeating some things that, you know, were already spoken of, but I really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. I'm so grateful that you're there doing this work and continuing to do this work, despite so many pushes to, you know, not do this work. I feel that, you know, there are a lot of community members who are very convinced that we have, you know, the top-notch, stellar police force in the entire country. And I really hope that they are correct. And I think we all hope that they're correct. That's a beautiful goal, and that's a beautiful thing to strive for. And I hope that that is right. And if that is correct, then that should be able to withstand a lot of scrutiny. And I think that the kind of scrutiny that is necessary right now in light of the actions that have been happening, you know, all over this country, and you know, with some of the questionable data that has been coming out about Marin County in particular, it is incumbent upon us to really look closely at all of this information. And you know, it's not any kind of a slight to our police force to ask them challenging questions. That is incredibly valid. That is what a really wonderful, top-notch, stellar, best in the country police force should be able to withstand. So that's what we should do. That's what every town in this country should be doing. And I applaud you all for doing that. And I will be here to continue to see this work being done. And so thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm sure that Interim Police Chief Tabaranza can handle these questions. And I look forward to hearing his responses to these questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're no hands.
muted.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment at this time. And members requested an opportunity to briefly respond if they felt that it was urgent to respond to public comment. So I want to remember that we agreed to do that. Okay, with your permission, I'd like to respond. I think it's really important to clarify something. May I have your permission, subcommittee? So I want to really lift up and I really want to honor John R.'s comment in regards to how I requested that a person of color take the certain role that I did. And I'd just like to make sure that our community knows that I have been asked to continue to center our voices on our committees, both the subcommittee and our RESJ, of our members who are not white. And so I really want to honor what you said, because I think that community members ensuring fairness and equity and with regards to my facilitation are so important. I very much value that you highlighted that. But I also want to communicate with our subcommittee and the community that it was very purposeful and intentional as a way to lift up and center voices who are not white. That's been something that has been asked of me from our committee members. And it is also a central tenet of anti-racist work that we're always centering our BIPOC voices. That's a term that some people are comfortable with and some people are not. But as a term to identify our non-white members, I'm going to use it here tonight. So important comment. Thank you so much for that comment. And I want to clarify the purpose and the intent so that we can lift up all our voices on our subcommittees. Okay, I'm going to, if there are no other responses to public comment, I'm going to move us on to items for the next meeting. Any items for our next meeting? Alexandra and I will be planning that agenda. So one item that I have is to finalize the April 22nd agenda. Veronica.
I'd love to devote the largest portion of the meeting, if you can think of it as you design it, for the survey, for developing our survey.
Okay, thank you. Other items?
Okay.
Veronica.
Just wanting to make sure that we know, if we haven't talked about it on RESJ, how to invite members of RESJ to fill our subcommittee, and what that looks like, and to make sure that Sophia is fully informed and knows how to join in. And yeah, thanks. And I totally understand why that was a little confusing from our last meeting.
And we have that to discuss on the RESJ, to be able to invite Sophia to join this committee, and also to invite the RESJ to just clarify and affirm what I believe we already heard at the last meeting, which was that we would like to see Sophia be able to be a non-youth member now that she's over 18, and that we can do that. But we'll clarify that there's still our question as to whether youth members would be able to vote. That we got an answer to that, and the answer is pretty clearly in state law, although that youth members can't vote except if it's a specific youth commission, which this isn't. And but that our votes at this point, we haven't had any votes on either our subcommittee or the full committee where it's come down to counting the numbers and deciding what to do. So we are certainly welcome to take into account the votes of youth members and just to understand where we are. So that's kind of we'll report the same thing at the RESJ, but yeah, that's, we'll be able to if everybody agrees, we'll be able to have Sophia join the RESJ, I mean, the PPPSA.
Any other action items before we move on? I mean, I'm sorry, any other items for our next agenda before I move on? Okay, Anne, can you read our next steps, please?
So the next steps that I have is that Alexandra will get back to Chief Tabaranza, the statistics, clarification on the statistics and data points. And then Bruce is going to follow up on the staff design survey.
Mhm.
Anything we're missing? That's what I had. All right. Process observation.
Okay. Let's see. So I think bravery and risk-taking happened. Being open, honoring personal accounts. Respect was something that was a little rocky, but I think we can work on that. Active listening to, asking questions and not assuming, I think is always important to work on and be aware of, because it's very easy to assume things. Sharing the space seems good tonight. Feels like I feel like we had a productive meeting. And it was a bit of we had a few moments, but I think that overall, I would like to highlight that this meeting was productive. So I hope that continues, as well as continues along with Sophia joining us. That's all.
Thank you so much. All right, that brings us to a close of our meeting with appreciations, and then we will adjourn. And a clarification, somebody asked me, no, we do not all have to appreciate each other. It's just simply an opportunity to end on a positive note and offer a shout out to your colleagues if you so choose. So I often leave quiet time so that people can think, and I can honor all learning styles, but there's no implication that you have to give an appreciation. So with that, I will hand it over for appreciations. Bruce.
Well, I want to really, really appreciate Veronica for how you, for what you went through tonight and will no doubt be processing, and how you handled it with, while de-escalating the situation and trying to, I think you showed that you heard and that you take seriously what was said, and that you'll attempt to deeply listen to what it means, whatever that is, which may not be the same as what the words are on the surface, but whatever it is, you're deeply listening to try to understand it, and I want to thank you for that. And Alexandra, and this has happened before, I just want to really thank you for your bravery and your clarity in speaking up, even if it's a situation that wasn't directed at you, but you really have, you are doing, you're doing your very, very best, I can see, to be the voice that you need to be in this committee. And so thank you for helping for doing that and for taking those risks. And Lisa, I know that facilitating this has been I don't know if it's more of a challenge than you thought it was going to be when you started out, but it's obviously not an easy thing. And so thank you so much. And I do agree, as Alexandra said, that we were productive tonight, and that was our goal. We've all felt, and on the RESJ as a whole, we've all felt some frustration about wanting to get to a more productive space, and I think we're doing that. We did that tonight, and that does feel good to me as well. Thank you.
Alexandra.
Yeah, I'd just like to appreciate everyone in this space and also the RESJ just for having the space to speak and to critically look at the way that our town is currently running. I think it's really great that we have the opportunity to look at things like this, and that our goal is to only make Fairfax better. And so I just appreciate that, and the diversity on the committee. And I want to uplift that our RESJ members who also identify as Black, there are multiple. So I really want to make sure that even though they're not here, they still are seen. And so, yeah, I just really appreciate everyone here for the productive evening. And I feel like we are moving towards gaining momentum. And I know that there are growing pains with a new committee. So I appreciate all of the work and effort that is put into this. So thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Veronica.
I want to say thank you for everybody who's here, for keeping at it, for sticking with it, and for the members of the community too, to continue to be showing up for it.
Thank you so much, everyone. I do believe this is some of the most difficult work we will ever be called to do, and we're doing it. So thank you so much. It is a privilege, as always, to hopefully carry you along in this journey, and I have deep appreciation for all that you do. So with that, I will close our meeting tonight and hand it over to Alexandra to make it official.
I have never officially closed a meeting, so I officially close this meeting, if that is all I need to say.